Hello and welcome to Undivided. I'm Brandi Kruse. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. Breaking news, I'm announcing an exploratory campaign to explore, I don't know, what should I explore, Nicole? My candidacy for president of the universe. Okay. But it's just exploratory.
Just exploratory.
So don't take it too seriously.
Okay.
Simply exploratory. I tweeted today that I was launching my exploratory campaign to find the best chai latte in Seattle.
Okay.
A lot of important things to do, and we're going to talk about exploration today because Attorney General Bob Ferguson, a day after Governor Jay Inslee announced that he was not going to seek a fourth term, just a day later, Attorney General Bob Ferguson announced that he is going to launch an exploratory bid for governor, which is, of course, BS. I'll get to that more in a moment, but here is part of the video that Bob Ferguson released today.
I'm standing in front of the first door I knocked on to announce my exploratory campaign to be the next governor of Washington State. I look forward to listening and learning from Washingtonians in every county and corner of this great state. The only way we can win and move Washington forward is building the same grassroots coalition we always have, together. Join me.
So a couple things. First of all, there is no such thing as an exploratory campaign in Washington state. It's not something that exists under our state campaign finance laws. So when you go to fill out the paperwork, to be a candidate, you're either a candidate or you're not a candidate. There is no, I'm dipping my toe in and I'm going to just raise funds, just to see if people want me to do it. No, that doesn't exist under the law. Exploratory campaign, to me, and what Bob Ferguson is doing, is he's trying to come across as humble. He's trying to come across as not too interested in the job, as if I'm going to go, he's holding these, it says, listening tours around the state, as if he really cares to hear whether people want him to run for office. No, he's running for governor. That's what this announcement is. He is going to run for governor regardless of what people tell him on these listening tours. And so I just kind of wish, Nicole, that he would just say it.
Oh, I wish you would too. But I do know, I did look this up, and the only thing that changes by announcing and this being an exploratory is that you don't have to report financial activity during this time period.
I don't know if that's true.
I'm looking at it.
Where are you looking at it at?
This is the Federal Election Commission.
Yeah, that's the Federal Election Commission.
Right,
there are some federal laws that allow certain federal offices to have an exploratory committee, but our state election laws do not allow. There is no such thing. It's you're either a candidate or you're not a candidate.
And they have to report everything.
There's no difference.
The same.
There's no difference. You fill out the same exact paperwork. So I think that has to do with the FEC, federal election law, but our state campaign laws. So he's going to go out. He's going to start raising money. He just doesn't want to appear too eager.
So weird.
That's the bottom line. He doesn't want to appear too eager. No, he doesn't want to appear too eager and say what he should have done. And also, I think this is a bad campaign tactic, a bad campaign strategy, because you're watering down the eventual announcement where you say, yes, okay, now I'm a full-fledged candidate for the job. And I think that's silly. He said in 2020 that he would have done it. He suggested he would have done it if Jay Inslee didn't run continued his failed presidential bid and then eventually didn't run. So I just think it's silly. Just come out, Bob. We all know you want the job. You're right now probably the front runner for the job, so just do it. I'm going to play a couple more clips from his video because I thought there was a couple things. I just want, before I play these clips, all I want at this point in Washington state, I know I'm never going to get a governor who agrees with me on most things, probably. I just want someone who is not a hypocrite. And let me give you an example. So I'm not going to play his whole video because it's like 3 minutes long, but here's a little clip where he talks about respecting healthcare decisions.
Here's what I believe. Washingtonians must have the freedom to make their own healthcare decisions.
That's interesting, because if memory serves me correctly, you did not allow the employees in your office to have the freedom to make their own healthcare decisions when it came to the COVID-19 vaccine. In fact, you had such strict rules around the need to be vaccinated against COVID-19 that even members of the press were, and to the best of my knowledge, still are mandated to show proof of a COVID-19 vaccine before they could come to press conferences at your office. It's something I'd emailed the Attorney General's office about many, many times saying, hey, is this still a policy? And they could have got rid of that policy by now, but you cannot say in one breath that you respect a woman's healthcare decisions and that's important to you, is people having the freedom to make their own healthcare decisions. Well, holding fast to a policy around COVID-19 vaccines that we know no longer makes any sense at all. The other clip I want to play, I just could not believe, I was telling Nicole when the video dropped today, I could not believe that he included this clip in this campaign video. So, he was in the national news a lot, Bob Ferguson was, during the Trump administration, and he was challenging him in court on a variety of things. And so the national news pundits just fell in love with Bob Ferguson. He was just a cable news darling on the left, at least on CNN and MSNBC. Here's a clip of a CNN talking head. Again, this is included in Bob's campaign launch video.
We're standing up for what's right, and we've won a lot.
This case brought by Washington State and Minnesota, this absolutely cut the Trump administration off at their knees.
We have an American hero, and that's the Attorney General of Washington. He stood up to bigotry and racism and contested it.
Oh gosh, where do I even start? He included a clip in his campaign launch video of a pundit on CNN calling him an American hero. I don't even know. I have so many issues with that. Does your ego get any bigger? Why would you ever include a clip of someone calling you an American hero? Which I tend to think is a little insulting to actual heroes in this country who risk their lives every single day. But I think that just shows a lot about what Bob Ferguson thinks of himself. And look, like I said, he was a media darling during that time, but there were a lot of things that you could have included that the national news said about you besides this flowery music in the background and this picture of you with an American flag behind you smiling and a CNN pundit calling you an American hero. I could not believe he included that. So my takeaway on Bob Ferguson is, and I'm going to get to how the rest of the 2024 field for governor is shaping up at this moment, because there's some other things that are happening behind the scenes. But Bob, it's okay to want to run for governor. You're the Attorney General. You're perfectly qualified as far as, on paper to run for governor. You've been contemplating it not so secretly for years. You don't have to call it an exploratory campaign. No such thing exists. Just say you want to run for governor and go out and try to earn people's votes. That's fine. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's super strange to me. So at the same time, there was a not so cryptic tweet from Hillary Franz, the Commissioner of Public Lands, and I want to see if she's updated her Twitter account yet. No, not yet. So 4 hours ago, here's what Hillary Franz tweeted on her campaign Twitter handle. She wrote, "Stay tuned, big announcement coming soon, #watch this space." And then after that, she alluded to this ongoing PDC battle where, and I'll explain it. Let me read her tweet and I'll explain what's going on. She wrote, "And I reiterate my pledge to not transfer surplus campaign funds until the PDC is done updating guidelines to ensure campaign contribution limits are not violated. I hope all candidates do the same. Washingtonians deserve clean and fair elections." So this tells me that she's absolutely going to enter the race for governor. But as to her second point there, basically there's this fight that she's kind of backing because Bob Ferguson, he's got already a war chest and these surplus campaign funds that he can bring over for the race for governor. But there's this question about whether that would count against his campaign contribution limits for the gubernatorial race. And if the PDC allows that, then Hillary Franz starts way, way back on campaign money. And so she's trying to push against that for obvious reasons. But so it becomes clear to me that now we're going to have Bob Ferguson. We're going to have Hillary Franz. I don't know when she's going to make that announcement. I also thought it was weird that she teased it like that. The same with Bob. It's like, just announce you're running for governor. And for her, I think it's better to make a splash and put out the video and say, I'm announcing my campaign for governor, as opposed to a measly little tweet on a Twitter account that has 1,000 followers where you say, stay tuned, big announcement coming soon.
Why not beat him to it?
Well, it doesn't
if he's going to be exploratory.
Well, and it's not even about beating him to it. It's just about, just throw your hat in the ring and own it. Why do you have to, what are we going to do? What is a Twitter account saying, stay tuned with 1,000 followers? How does that make a big splash? Now we all know you're going to run and we're just sort of waiting to hear what you're going to say. To me, I don't know who advises these campaigns. I was telling you earlier, we could make a bunch of money if at one time, like 30 years down the road, we stopped the Undivided podcast by being political consultants. Because some of these things, I'm like, don't do that. Make a big splashy entrance to the race.
Yes.
And instead, they're doing it in these ways that it's just going to piddle out and the excitement sort of goes away.
Yes.
So anyway, Bob Ferguson, Hillary Franz. And then there's this question about, are there candidates that we might not have thought of? Because we know King County Executive Dow Constantine, for sure, I thought he was going to run, but then he came out a few weeks ago and said no, and that he was officially kind of withdrawing his name from consideration. That surprised me. But it got me thinking about, so you remember last week on the show, we had two Democratic state senators in, Senator John Lovick and Senator Mark Mullet. And at the end of the interview with Senator Mullet, I had just asked him this throwaway question about 2024. And first we started by talking about President Biden. And then I asked him kind of jokingly about the gubernatorial race. And here's what he said. Would you run for governor?
Would I run for governor?
Have you thought about it?
I have been asked by several people to consider that option. Session literally finished like 3 days ago.
Would you? It's something you would rule out?
No, I definitely would not rule it out. I just think a lot of people have talked to me about it, and my mindset is I had to get through session. That's happened. At this point, I just want to get to the summer and see what things look like, in the summer. But it's something I'm definitely not off the table.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, yeah, we talked about Bob Ferguson and Jay Inslee yesterday and had a big debate about their level of likability. You'll have to watch the segment.
Oh,
if you ever
like
run,
it.
we'll also have a lengthy debate about your level of likability. That is not a no.
And we don't have to argue that one. We both think he's the most likable, I think.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's the most, to me, but again, I go back to, we hadn't even aired that clip. And now I'm like, that is not a no. And usually when it's not a no, that sounds a lot like a yes.
Yep.
But
he's in exploratory mode.
Yeah, he's in exploratory mode in his own brain.
Yep.
But what I think would be interesting about someone like Senator Mark Mullet is he is the most moderate Democrat in Olympia amongst the senators and representatives, and he has had some very public battles with his own party. Governor Inslee was mad at him for not voting against the capital gains tax, or not the capital gains tax, the carbon tax. And so what did Inslee do? Inslee went out and supported a progressive challenger, something he'd never done in his time as governor. And so Mark Mullet has been willing to take on his own party, his political future be damned, in a very public way. And so if he's serious about it, I don't hate that idea.
Oh, no. The fiscally conservative part of it will win over a lot.
Well, as a business owner, he understands that you can't tax businesses to death and then expect them to contribute to a burgeoning economy.
Right.
And you also understand everything that goes along with that. And I will also say about Senator Mullet is he was leading the charge with Republicans to try to put checks on Governor Jay Inslee's emergency power. Because he saw that's common sense. It's like, no, this isn't how our political system in the United States is supposed to work, that we have one person who has unchecked power for what was it, 950 days, more than 950 days. And so I gave
just
him,
because he's your party, you can't question it or think that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was about for him, and I realize we're talking a lot about Mark Mullet, not knowing for sure whether he's going to run, but since he brought it up on the show,
I like him.
I think for him, it's always been about what makes sense absent political party. And that's all I really ask for is I just don't want somebody who's a raging hypocrite, and who understands that there is more to Washington State than Seattle. There's more to Washington State than pleasing Seattle progressives. And if you're going to be a governor, you have to run for governor? You should want to do your best.
I run for governor?
Sorry, did you want to see that clip again?
No. You should want to do your best to be a governor for everyone. That's the job, right? There's more than 7 million people in the state of Washington. And I actually think that it's impossible to truly be a governor for all of Washington. It's just too diverse economically, politically, but you should do your best. And so someone like that who, honestly, I think that Mark Mullet could easily just be an independent. I always try to convince people to be independents, just because it's much funner in this position because you don't have to worry about pleasing a party ever. The one thing I will say about Mark Mullet, though, is he voted to ban assault weapons, and he voted in favor of Senate Bill 5599, which we talked about on the Sunday show. If you missed it, Sundays with Subscribers this past week, I asked him to justify both of those votes. So those could certainly hurt him with any Republicans if it came down to that. Yeah.
So speaking of running as an independent, how do you think somebody could win not having either party's support?
Well, it's easier for a state that's not, or a race that's not federal, because you don't have to worry about. I think it's near impossible to win a federal race as an independent because you have so much money coming in from the parties for those races, less so with a statewide race. I mean, honestly, I still think it would be borderline impossible. If I thought you could win a race as an independent, then I'd run for something. But, and we've talked about that, but it's just, it's so challenging, the money part of it. I mean, you'd have to have sky-high name recognition, and you'd have to spend a lot of time out meeting with voters. But I think it would be really, really difficult. I mean, Julie Anderson, who ran as a nonpartisan, which is essentially an independent, for Secretary of State, I mean, she almost won. And I really thought that was going to be a litmus test for whether it was truly possible. And I think she would have won or come close to winning had Republicans not mounted some writing campaign that was never going to be successful. And they ended up just handing the seat over to Democrats, which was just a silly thing. So I don't know if it's possible, but if it is possible, I'll be the first one lining up to do it.
Okay, you heard it here first.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
It's my exploratory committee
Breaking news.
for whether independents can run for office and win. Okay, so we just... Bob Ferguson, Hillary Franz, maybe Mark Mullet. I'm trying to think who else would enter the race. I know there's talk of who's on the Republican side of things. We'll be looking at some candidates to possibly interview, but no one has jumped forth so far that has close to the name recognition on the west side of the state that they would need to be able to even come close to winning. That doesn't mean we're not going to cover their campaigns. I've had some questions from you guys about interviewing people who are already in the race, and so we will certainly make an effort to do that. But I kind of have this... You guys tell me if you think this is a fair approach. So I get questions all the time about how I decide who to interview and who gets coverage, et cetera, et cetera. And this is very common in media. It's something you go through all the time in newsrooms across America about who do we dedicate? Because if you've got 20 candidates in a race, which happened one year in the governor's race, how do you decide which ones you give airtime to and which ones you don't? Because there has to be a cutoff somewhere. I mean, am I going to give the good space guy, the guy who always runs as good space guy in Seattle, airtime? No. So I tend to go with, what is your active campaign structure like? Are you out actively campaigning? Do you have, a legitimate looking website? How many donations have you received? My general rule is I'm not going to do more for your campaign by having you on than you're doing for your own campaign. So if I think that by virtue of us opening up our social media audience of 250,000 to you is going to do more for your campaign than you've done for yourself, there's a chance that I'm not going to have you on. So that's sort of my barometer. Is that a fair barometer, Nicole, for judging whether to give someone? So. Now, if someone they're kind of a relative unknown, but they have a really fascinating story, then yeah, I might have them on to talk about that story. But so there's no hard and fast rule for who gets attention and who doesn't get attention. But I think it's a combination of things. And a lot of that has to do with how much effort and energy are you putting into your own campaign, and what sort of support are you seeing as a result in the form of donations, in the form of volunteers, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, another election related story I just want to get to because Nicole's description of it in our show sheet today was funny. So longtime Washington Insurance Commissioner Mike Kreidler, here's the article from the Seattle Times. Mike Kreidler will not seek re-election. So Kreidler has been in the office of insurance commissioner for some time. I think we have this, don't you, Nicole? The article on Mike Kreidler from the Seattle Times. He's been in this position for some time, more than 2 decades. He says that he is not going to seek re-election. And this is not a surprise because you'll recall that there have been widespread calls from even his own party, including Governor Jay Inslee, for him to resign because he's accused of using like racist slurs and being demeaning to staff members. So there was all this going on. But I would also remind you, and Nicole reminded me in the show sheet, he is, what did you call him? Mr. Credit Scores Are Racist insurance commissioner.
Right.
He's the guy who didn't want your credit score tied to your insurance rates because that's racist.
So then everybody's insurance rates just go up.
Which is, of course, ridiculous. I mean, the responsibility factor of your credit score should absolutely tie in to your insurance rates. But he totally bought into this whole idea that factoring that in the slightest is racist. So I am really happy to see him go, and I'm really excited to see who we can get into that job, because insurance commissioner isn't the sexiest position. It doesn't get talked about a lot, but it is so critically important to our everyday lives in a way that sometimes I don't think we understand or appreciate. Okay, one more story here at the top. This was an interesting but not surprising poll that came out. It was done by the Associated Press and the Center for Public Affairs Research, and it looked at whether media adds to division in this country, which I would say the obvious answer is yes, but in case you want to see it in the numbers. So this is from the Associated Press. Americans fault news media for dividing the nation, which is just a no-brainer, but the numbers were pretty staggering. So according to the AP poll, nearly 3 in 4 U.S. adults say the news media is increasing political polarization in the country. And they said 74% say the news media increases political divisions. 6% say the media decreases political divisions. I want to live in the world those 6% are living in. Like, what? And then 18% said it doesn't have any impact. And obviously, there are varying degrees of this, right? If you're watching only Fox News or only MSNBC, yeah, things are going to feel really divided to you because you are living in an echo chamber. And I always tell people, even if you agree more so with what Fox News and how they cover things or MSNBC, it's always good just to get a variety of news sources and ingest news that way, because what I find is the truth is usually somewhere in the middle about what's going on. Like if I were to watch Fox News's coverage of the border, and then I switch and watch MSNBC's coverage of the border, I'm like, okay, between those two things, I think I can carve out what's actually happening at the southern border. And I think one of my questions is there going to be a tipping point, I guess, for Americans? We talked on the show last week about where we're at in the state of the media and Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon going away and Tucker probably moving towards something independent. A lot of journalists, myself included, choosing the independent route. And I don't think that that's going to serve to make the media climate less divisive. I don't think it's going to have an impact. I mean, I do commentary now. I went from doing straight news on Fox to doing commentary. And I'm sure there are some people who, even though the title of our show is Undivided, who find me very divisive, and that's fine. I think that I wonder if there's a tipping point where, for instance, News Nation is trying to carve out this place for itself as a more unbiased alternative to the Foxes and the MSNBCs and the CNNs. And I think they've done that to relative success. I mean, their ratings are still really low, but when I watch their border coverage, my friend Allie Bradley is a border correspondent for News Nation. I'm like, wow, that is substantially different than what I would see on Fox or MSNBC. And so perhaps if they can build trust with people and build viewership, there might be some outlets that pop up that truly can commit to trying the best they can to be down the middle. The only slip up of News Nation is they hired Chris Cuomo. And I think Chris Cuomo's okay, absent all the crazy stuff during the pandemic, like his actual coverage of things. And I've watched him on News Nation, and it's been much better than his coverage on CNN. I think part of that's the atmosphere that you're operating in. But he has such a taint on his name.
It's a signal to the viewer.
It is.
That we're okay with this. Although
yeah.
I think there's space to have both views coming in. Both are people that see through two different lenses,
right,
and you bring them together and then they have discussions if they can all get along. But it's also a flawed concept in its own right, that it's not fun to argue all the time. And so you put these people together that are going to argue with each other. It's a hard job to sell, right? Like, here, come and argue with this person, like discuss your differences all the time. And it's not fun all the time.
Yeah, but if that's what you signed up for as a talking
and if you're
head,
getting paid
right?
enough, I guess. Yeah. And then if it gets fun to watch as well. But I think that it's going to take the viewers collectively coming and saying, okay, we're going to go away from the if it bleeds, it leads, and actually look for truth in what's happening, right? So, okay, that's a sexy headline that Fox is running, or that's a whatever headline that CNN's running, but we're going to go to like, here, I just want to know what's happening. So
right,
then you get more, war coverage or things that are going on in other countries that we hear nothing about because we're obsessed with, Hunter's paternity test or whatever it is. So
Right.
It's us saying we don't want that anymore.
Yeah, I think it does come down to the consumer. And also you make a good point about our willingness to see disagreement play out in real time. Like, are we willing to acknowledge that, our silo isn't the only silo that exists? Right. And sometimes it's okay to watch a healthy, robust debate on the issues. And I even find that, if I turn on MSNBC, and sometimes I'll listen to podcasts that are hosted by people I don't agree with. And sometimes it just cements my views. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to expect your views to change by consuming a media outlet you don't agree with, but it can help you actually, when you hear the other side, it can help you come up with, not only retorts when you're confronted about your views on things, but it can also help you solidify your argument and your worldview and your morals and all of that. So I think it's very healthy.
I will say a good example of that is when you and Lovick sat down last week and you were, making some points that apparently he hadn't heard before, which was... it's interesting that he hadn't heard those points before, but that's a good example of those things need to be said and heard, and then you take that back and then you can reformulate your opinion, or you can, figure out why you want to stick with your opinion or whatever it is. But.
Yeah, because he did say that, his vote on Senate Bill 5599, if you want to go watch the Sunday show, it's up on Patreon and Locals for subscribers. He did say that his vote on that was kind of influenced by where he sits, which is he's surrounded by Democrats who have a particular view on that issue. And that was sort of the echo chamber that he got. And so that influenced his vote in a way where when he and I sat down and I explained my position on Senate Bill 5599 coming from the parental rights aspect, he's like, well, I hadn't really thought about that. And it's like, yeah, because you weren't confronted with that. You weren't forced to think about it because we have a one-party echo chamber in Washington State. So anyway, that is sort of where things are sitting with 2024. The media and media divisiveness will certainly play a role in the 2024 races, and especially at the national level in particular. Okay, I told you guys yesterday that we're adding First Mark Insurance as a sponsor on the podcast, and I did my due diligence and went through the First Mark Challenge. If you go to firstmarkinsurance.com, there's a little tab where you can click to take the First Mark Challenge, and essentially what they do is they go through all of your insurance needs, both the insurance that you already have, and they talk about the insurance that you might need. And so Mike and I, we sat down with Dave Taylor. And this is a process. You go through, an initial call, and they're working with you to try to come up with insurance that is going to match your needs at this moment in time. And the best thing about First Mark is they are like a concierge service for you. They're working for you. They're not working for insurance providers. So the only dog in the fight they have is actually making sure that you have the best insurance possible. And as Dave Taylor with First Mark told me, that it might mean that they come away from the First Mark Challenge and tell you, actually, the insurance you have is pretty good, and I don't recommend you change it. Here's Dave.
Sometimes those findings may lead to a recommendation to stay with your current provider for the time being and just make a few changes to your coverage. Most often though, we will be able to find you a better option, and our recommendation will be to move from your current carrier over to First Mark.
Yeah, and that's what happened with Mike and I. So Mike and I actually, as of May 1st, we are officially members of the First Mark family. After going through the First Mark Challenge, we found out that we were woefully undercovered, which was kind of a scary thing, thinking about how hard we work for what we have and knowing that it wasn't properly protected. And also it was good timing for us because we're getting married in September. So do what I did and what so many have done. Take the First Mark Challenge. Go to firstmarkinsurance.com. Regardless of what you need, a whole bevy of things, even ring insurance I bundled into my policy, which was really good. So firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com, and take the First Mark Challenge, as I did. All right, let us get to, there is an update in Washington State's continued efforts to try to actually criminalize drug possession. I will say it's not a positive update. Let's get to it in our segment, Unbelievable. So one of the big storylines we've been following is the fact that last day of the legislative session, lawmakers called it quits without passing a law to make drug possession a crime in Washington state. I won't get into all the background, but essentially the state Supreme Court struck down our existing drug possession law, and if there isn't a replacement by July 1st, then drugs are de facto legalized. I could get a big old pocket of meth, walk around smoking it, or you smoke meth, right? You don't inject it. smoking meth. And I could do that legally with no recourse. And that is not, as you know, jokes aside, that is not what we need in Washington State right now. We have a drug crisis that's killing people on our streets in every community. No community is untouched from that. So the idea that our lawmakers would not prioritize that, work together to pass something, is unreal to me. And it just shows the true dysfunction. So Governor Jay Inslee, he had a press conference the last night of the session, and he said, I will call a special session so that lawmakers have to come back and pass a bill before July 1st. And he said that he was waiting on them to come to an agreement and a consensus behind the scenes. And so I saw these tweets from Matt Markovich. So Matt Markovich used to be with Como News. Now he's covering the legislature for Cairo Radio. And he sent out a tweet saying, Governor Inslee's deputy communications director confirms the governor will announce a special session date tomorrow for lawmakers to vote on a revised drug possession bill. The governor had said he would call a special session only if the votes exist to pass. So this tweet from Matt Markovich sent the internet and politicos on the internet into a frenzy because the Republican leader in the House and the Senate had heard nothing about this. Nothing. They were like, the governor's going to set a special session date? We haven't been told there's an agreement on a drug possession bill, which freaked everyone out because reading into that tweet, that would mean that Democrats had crafted their own agreement without any input from Republicans, and they were going to push forth with a special session. And I ended up finding out from sources that actually what's happening here is Governor Inslee is just going to set a special session date without any agreement having been reached. And I don't know if he's going to do that as like leverage, saying, hey, the date is May 19th or whatever, you better have an agreement by then. But that is a terrible idea because it puts undue pressure on legislators to try to come to some sort of consensus by then. And my fear is that if they are approaching that date and no such deal has been reached, that Democrats will take the easy way out and they will kowtow to the progressive wing of their party and they will push through without any Republican support a watered down version of the bill that has bipartisan consensus. That's a terrifying thing. I think it's totally irresponsible for the governor to set a special session date without an agreement behind the scenes. I will say the only thing that gives me a little bit of hope, last week on the show, I mentioned the 2 Democratic senators that we had in. I got commitments from both of them that they would not support a watered-down version of the bill that is weaker than the one that was initially passed on a bipartisan basis in the Senate. So just to remind you, so here are clips from that conversation with Senator John Lovick and Senator Mark Mullet. One of the fears that I have, I heard it expressed from Senator John Braun on our show earlier in the week, is that Democrats will kind of cave in to the part of their party that wants to reduce the law enforcement aspect. And they'll do it by themselves, and they'll come back and push through a weaker bill than what you voted for in the Senate using just Democratic support. Would you support a weaker bill than the one that you voted for in the Senate?
So I'm going to say this now, and I'll state it parenthetically. I will not support a weaker bill. Because, I've been told time and time again that, we need the carrot and we also need the stick. And I think the stick has to be the piece about a gross misdemeanor. So I do not plan to support a weaker bill.
The fear, and I, just in your seat a couple of days ago, we had Senator John Braun, and he was saying his real fear is that Democrats, knowing it'll look bad if they don't get something done before July 1st, and wanting to still appease that fringe of the House Democratic caucus, that they'll just get together, agree on something as a Democratic party in both chambers that is watered down, and they'll push it through without any care or concern for what Republicans think about it. Is that a possibility?
I think there's enough Democrats in the Senate who are committed to a bipartisan solution. When it comes to public safety, I actually think the Republicans have a lot of good ideas on the public safety front. And I, for one, incorporate and listen to those ideas. And I think there's enough folks in the Senate that would demand that, we have to have a bipartisan solution. And you get better outcomes in Olympia when you have bills that both sides of the aisle have bought into. And on this issue right now, given how challenging drug possession is in the state of Washington and drug addiction, we have to get this one right. And it really has to be bipartisan.
Would you vote for a bill that is watered down.
I would not.
You would not. And I got that same commitment from Senator John Lovick this week. So you've been clear on that. Has
Crystal
that
clear.
been communicated to House leadership that I will not support anything watered down from what we came together on?
I think that's our goal now, is to really force that, to make sure they understand that there is a group of us in the Senate who feel strongly enough that, and it's really, for me, it goes back to 2 years ago when, I voted for the bill that made it a misdemeanor with the 2 diversions. And my big takeaway from that is I have to do a better job of listening to the people on the ground who are going to implement the bill. And so watering this thing down when everyone who has to actually implement this policy is telling me that's really not helping us solve the problem, I'm not going to make the same mistake I did 2 years ago.
Which is good to hear. But again, I'm confused why Governor Inslee, and I just looked to see, I haven't seen anything from his Twitter account or anything that he's set a date yet, and I hope he's been convinced otherwise, because there were multiple sources and multiple outlets saying that he was going to set a special session date today. I haven't seen anything. Nicole, have you seen anything come down? No, from the governor. So we'll be watching that, but it makes no sense for him to do that until a deal has been reached. There's no reason to put undue pressure on them in this situation. Allow them to continue to work behind the scenes. I do want them to get something done, but what I don't want is for it to be a bill so weak, it only gets Democratic support and does nothing to help with the drug crisis that we're experiencing on our streets. And so the governor, that's just a really silly thing to do. I know that he doesn't want the embarrassment of Washington state de facto legalizing drugs, but at least we have the safety net of cities and counties that have leaders who are reasonable and are saying, we will step in, put our own laws on the books to enforce drug possession and open air drug use if the state does not do it. So I wanted to update you on that. Okay, are you in the market to sell your home? I've seen a couple more. For a while, there was like no homes for sale in our neighborhood. And suddenly there's been a couple popping up here and there, which I'm like, okay, I think that's a good sign. If you are in the market to sell your home, visit our friends over at West Jones and Associates at sellwithwest.com. That's sellwithwest.com. Wes was telling us that they actually are seeing a little window of opportunity. The market, you just have to be honest, the market had been all over the place for a while. And there was a period of time where I'm like, I do not blame anyone for saying I'm not selling my house right now. But he says that there actually is an opportunity right now to get multiple offers, to get cash offers again, and you will be competing against fewer homes. I had Wes Jones in the studio to talk about, kind of his advice for people who are hesitant to list their home at the current time.
What I know right now is that today it's a pretty solid time. If you are listed on the market, you are likely to be one of the only homes for sale in your neighborhood. And that is a fantastic position to be in. Where are we at in 3 or 4 months? Well, if interest rates go up, buyers have less purchasing power and homes will probably take longer, which means that you will likely be competing against more of your neighbors.
So if you're wondering if now is a good time to sell your home, visit sellwithwest.com, sellwithwest.com. Not only is there a handy tool there, we can find out what your home's value is, but Wes will give you the best possible advice as to whether right now is a good time and a good opportunity for you to sell your home, maybe move elsewhere. I hope not, though. I hope you don't give up on Washington state yet. So if you want to sell your home faster at a higher price with fewer contingencies, visit sellwithwest.com. Sell with Wes, a better way to sell your home. Okay, let's dip outside of Washington state momentarily, where I am conflicted about this. So the mayor of New York has been doing some interesting things, and he's at least acknowledging some of the public safety challenges that they're having. I think he's very similar to Bruce Harrell in that way, Eric Adams. So this is a story from Business Insider. Eric Adams is handing out hundreds of free Apple AirTags in a bid to cut the number of auto thefts in New York. And Nicole, you put this in the show sheet this week, and I thought that Apple AirTags, so apparently New York City, they bought a bunch of Apple AirTags.
Right.
And they handed them out to people and basically said, hey, if your car gets stolen and you've got one of these, we will send the cops to track it down. And I thought, aren't Apple AirTags like $1,000? But you said they're like $29.
Yeah, they're pretty cheap.
Okay. I still don't like the government having to foot the bill for really anything, but in this case. So Eric Adams said the city's going to hand out 500 free Apple AirTags to New York residents. And your initial concern was then people would just track the car down themselves and get into a battle royale with someone.
In our state, that's kind of what's happening. People are just getting frustrated and going and taking matters into their own hands, trying to get their property back. But so my initial thought was, wow, this is going to be trouble. But he claims that they've already sent cops to specific air tags that have in stolen vehicles and got the vehicles back. So if you're going to follow through, then I actually think it's a decent idea. I mean, it's something at least where we're not doing much of anything in this state.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's creative, so I like it in that sense. But I have the same issue with it that I had when Bob Ferguson came out and said his answer to car theft was he's going to hold Hyundai and Kia accountable for the fact that their cars are so easy to steal. It's like, that's not getting to the root of the problem, right? Why are people committing crimes like that at record rates? Although I will say, if this is a situation where they're following through, they're making arrests, that is a way to deter future crimes. Because one of the things that we know, the vast majority of car thefts, it's attributable to a pretty small group of people.
Right.
And so if you can get a couple of them where you throw the book at them, then I think you're preventing future car thefts down the road.
And finding out where they go. That's the key, right? So if they're able to take them, it brings me back to my, I don't know, 80s, 90s, whatever, Adventures in Babysitting. And they steal the cars and they take them back to that shop. So they're all going back to that shop, but cops don't know where they're going, right? So this is going to tell them where these cars are going every time they get stolen and
I mean,
taken apart.
I wonder, New York's a big city, so 500 isn't very much. And what are the chances that those 500 people are the ones who get their car stolen? So that I'm a little bit like, maybe people will buy their own air tags and then call the police for it and that. But I don't know. Maybe they're giving it to like people who park their cars in high risk areas. I don't know.
Again, it's something.
Yeah. Can I tell you my embarrassing air tag story?
Sure.
So I would say I'm not tech savvy. Fair?
Okay.
That's why we have Daryl, right?
Yep.
Like, we need Daryl, and we called him desperately like 100 times today.
Yes.
I was moving stuff out of our old studio. So there was some stuff there that we didn't need at our new studio. I was packaging it up, bringing it home. And I found this little white circular thing. And it was like white on top and black on bottom. And I'm like, what is this? And I thought, oh my gosh, like somebody has put an air tag like in my stuff and it's tracking me. And so I smashed this thing open and the inside's just hollow. And I'm like, wait, weren't you part of this?
Immediately you just smashed it? No, I was not part of this.
Are you sure I didn't tell you about this?
No.
Maybe it was Mike. Yeah, I was like, it's not my air tag, right? I was like, smashed it because I wanted to stop the track. Wow, I need to watch less TV. It was just hollow inside. Well, it turns out that it was actually a little a little magnet that came with a whiteboard I had. It was just
a round magnet.
It was a round magnet that went on a whiteboard. I'm going to cry. Whiteboard that I had. It was somebody, maybe it was my sister who I was like, I'm trying to figure out what this is. And then she kind of traced it back to this whiteboard I bought at Target and looked at it online. And sure enough, there was like a little magnet that looked just like the thing I had smashed to bits.
You've never seen an air tag? I'm going to bring one in tomorrow.
I know what it looks like now. I just saw it on the story. But, it was like kind of circular. And anyway, wow, I'm crying. I have my moments. I was like, smashed it.
I've actually heard
there was
I think that there's been a couple people around here that have used air tags. I've seen some stories where people have gone and found their car because they left air tags in them. So I know it's happening everywhere, and including here. But again, in our state, we're not doing anything to deter criminals. We're telling them like, we're not going to chase you. Or if you call the cops and we know where where your car is, you're not going to get response. So,
and I don't even think we have enough cops to chase every air tag.
It's not on the cops. I'm not blaming them, but there's not enough time because there's so much crime happening in this state that's low priority.
Right.
And
so you got to follow through or else it's just useless. And then you've spent all this money on giving people air tags that they're just going to use for something else anyway. I should attach them to my keys because I lose my keys, or your cat. Oh, that's right. You do have one your cat. You're such a weirdo. We're never going to get you a date. Oh my God. Okay.
I should keep these things to myself.
You should. Okay. We're going to get to your guys' comments in just a moment. But first, eastsideweightlossclinic.com. Eastsideweightlossclinic.com. If you feel like you just need to get in better shape, feel better about yourself before summer, do what I did. Check out the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan. I lost, and now I'm down, that graphic is actually inaccurate. I'm down 35 pounds now from my peak in November, but I lost most of that weight in 2 months. And I've been able to maintain that weight loss, and now it's May. And I still got like 10 pounds left to go, but that first 30 pounds or so came off quick. And so if you're just wanting to get in better shape during the summer, for summer, there's 2 months left to summer. So if you follow the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan, it's not easy. It's not magic. You have to eat less. You're on kind of a diet that is very structured. So if that's not going to work for you, Eastside Weight Loss Clinic won't be for you. But if you've tried everything like I have, God knows I poured so much money into different weight loss diets and stuff. This one was easy for me because it did have the structure. It did have the accountability to someone. You know, you're paying someone, Dr. Ryan Coogan, and they're going to make sure that you're keeping up with it, etc. So go to eastsideweightlossclinic.com, eastsideweightlossclinic.com. And the easiest way is just schedule a free 15-minute consultation. You go to the website, you hit consultation, you book it, and you tell them that you heard about it on unDivided with Brandi Kruse, which is critical because then we can keep them as a sponsor. But I've heard from so many of you who have started the program and who are getting great results, and I'm so happy for you. Look at us. We're just going to be all fit and fancy by the time the summer comes. Okay, let's get to some of your comments from today. On Patreon, Kyle says, how can Fergie be an effective AG while running an exploratory campaign for governor? I hope and pray we get a good Republican contender or even a less terrible Democratic candidate. Bob terrifies me. And I'd be curious from some of you if you think that the two Democrats that we talked about today, Hillary Franz or Bob Ferguson, or not Bob Ferguson, Hillary Franz or Mark Mullet, who, we played the little clip with him suggesting that he wouldn't rule it out, if those are Democrats that you might vote for if it was a choice between them and Bob Ferguson. Let's see. Vicky says, yay for First Mark. I talked to Dory about them and my interview is scheduled then. Well, still love that I got to talk about FM with Dory. Yeah. So she sounds like Vicky joined up with First Mark because Dory was an advertiser or they were a sponsor on Dory's show. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Andy says, Cuomo is great on News Nation. So is Allie. Yeah. Cuomo is better on News Nation than he was on CNN. And I think that tells you about kind of the environment that you're working in and almost this feeling or this pressure to be a certain way, which is really interesting. But Allie Bradley is just a rock star on News Nation. I don't think that woman ever sleeps. She's at the border all the time. Aaron on YouTube writes, the Bob's pandering to spew this idea that he's even remotely interested in what people have to say. It's nauseating. He's trying to see himself as humble. That's exactly what's going on here. I 100% agree. Is that Aaron Lang? 100% sounds like an Aaron Lang comment. You see how I knew? I know your last names now. You can't get away from me. I have an air tag for every single one of you too. Yeah, it's really odd. Like I said, you're in a position to run for governor and maybe win. You should be proud of that. You should be excited to run. Just say that you're running for governor. It's not an exploratory committee that does not even exist in Washington state. So just do it. Jeannie says, please, someone with morals, please run against him. He's just as bad, if not worse than Inslee. Ugh, Washington state is so ruined. It is an extension of the Inslee administration. And again, I don't dislike Bob as a person. I hope we'll definitely request to have him in to talk about his exploratory campaign. I'm sure he'll come in. The thing is, to me, is we need a little bit of, if not just a pause, I think a pause would be great. I wish we could have no governor for 4 years, but something that will be different, even if it's just for 4 years. Even we need a little break from the trajectory that we're on in this state. And Bob Ferguson is not a break. He is a continuation of the policies that have been pushed in Washington state. When you think about Jay Inslee started by running by saying he wouldn't raise taxes. Think about how far he's come from that in 11 years. And it's just this continuing momentum toward policies that are making our communities less safe, that are making us personally poorer. And I just think that we need someone who's going to just be a little backstop for the craziness for 4 years. Just a little, even if it's with their veto pen, just on the desk, just absolutely not going to let some of these ridiculous policies fly. That's what we need. Okay, let's see. Reagan on Facebook says, I'd vote for just about anyone over Bob Ferguson. Jethro says, bruh. ... All three of our cats have air tags on their collars. Don't hate.
Thank you for the support.
First of all,
Jethro.
Nicole is the one who chooses what comments I read.
I know.
And I'm sure that for every comment like Jethro's, there were 10 comments making fun of Nicole for having air tags on her
The
cats.
two ladies, Midwest Adventures.
Yeah.
They're very worried I'll track my boyfriend. So now they're worried for my boyfriends. My future boyfriends, I guess.
Well, so you know what I did hear about
Would not do
AirTags?
that.
You know what I did hear about AirTags
Okay.
is you will be alerted if an AirTag is following you, right?
Oh.
Yeah, your phone, I read this, your phone alerts you if there is an AirTag, and you can say, confirm that's mine, like if you've got it in your car.
Oh.
But if an AirTag is following kind of your GPS coordinates, you'll be notified because there were some issues with people, like stalkers, like AirTag in people's cars. So
Oh.
what I'm trying to say is,
I guess
don't
if you have an
don't AirTag someone you're
I would
dating,
never
Nicole.
do that.
Don't do that.
But interesting. I wonder, I'm going to have to look into that. I didn't know if that would be good to know. So that, you know, I don't have a stalker too.
Weststeed says on YouTube, no magnets are safe around Brandi. I can't remember what I bashed it with, but yeah, it was done.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, too funny. Can we quick tease what I'm doing after the show
Yeah,
today?
let's do it.
Yeah, so this is actually kind of interesting. Crosscut, which I've been kind of critical of Crosscut because I think they're just look at everything through a progressive lens, and I think they should just acknowledge that. But anyway, Crosscut asked me to be a moderator as part of their Crosscut Ideas Festival.
And they haven't canceled you yet.
And they haven't, I thought for sure, because people on Twitter, like the normal angry 5 people, who I actually think are probably just one person running 5 accounts, were like, Crosscut, she's a transphobe. Why would you have her? It's like, okay. And I was like, Crosscut's going to totally cave. And they didn't, which is nice. So coming up at 2 p.m. today, I'm going to be moderating a conversation with former Texas Congressman Will Hurd, who has not shied away from 2024 speculation. He and I are going to talk about a variety of things, including his opinion of the current state of the Republican Party, also the fact that he represented a Texas border district for 3 terms in Congress, and obviously that's just a really interesting topic. So immediately after the show today, I'll repost the link to where you can go, because this is a virtual event, so you can watch it from anywhere, but it starts at 2 p.m. today. Crosscut Ideas Festival. What we need to make sure we do is have it be the most watched event of the Ideas Festival, so they do know that people want to hear dissenting ideas on the Crosscut Ideas Festival. But I was really happy they asked me to do it, and I'm really looking forward to. Will is someone who I would have wanted to get on the show anyway, and so the opportunity to be able to talk to him today is great. So immediately after the show is done, I'll post in the comments on YouTube, Patreon, Locals, Facebook, and Twitter all the ways that you can join the conversation with Will Hurd and I coming up today at 2 p.m. And you have an opportunity to ask your own questions of Will Hurd. So that might be something that you want to do. Okay, this is great. I love our sanity check for today. Kudos to Nicole for finding it. Let's close with our daily dose of sanity. So I have said that the obsession with identitarianism is dangerous for our country, and just this outright obsession with the color of your skin, your sexual orientation, your gender identity, and just the fact that we're expected, or else we're bigots, to just acknowledge identities that, I'm sorry, aren't in line with scientific consensus. I mean, I've said that if you are, I'm going to sneeze, Nicole. Wait.
Oh, no.
Will you mute my mic?
Sure.
Oh, it's never happened live. Hold on.
Oh, they might have heard it through mine, but it wasn't very close. Okay.
All right, I'm back. We were just saying yesterday, I've never sneezed live.
I know.
It's allergies. If you are a transgender man and you want to, if you want to go by he, him, she, her pronouns, like I can do that. I can try my best. I can't promise I'm going to be perfect, but the they, them, I refuse to do it. I'm just going to call you by your first name. And then it just kind of goes on and on from there, like the zay, zam, zare. I'm just not doing it. Okay. I'm not doing it. And there is a councilman who in Delaware County, Indiana, who is, I think in a very effective way, pointing out just the absolute ridiculous nature of where we've found ourselves in America. And he joined Jesse Waters on Fox to talk about the fact that he has a new identity that he'd like you to respect.
Meet Ryan Webb, a straight white councilman from Delaware County, Indiana, who just announced he identifies as a woman. And not just any woman. Ryan has searched his soul and found out he's a woman of color. And since he's still attracted to females, that means he's also a lesbian. Ryan, what actually makes you a lesbian?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, Jesse. I've been asked that before. The fact that I am a lesbian is that I am identifying as a woman of color.
Got it.
I am continuing to retain my preferred pronouns of he and him. And I am married to my beautiful wife, Brandi. She's running for the Muncie City Council in tomorrow's election. And it makes me a lesbian because I'm completely in love with her. Even though I identify as a woman, we have 6 children together. So I think it more than qualifies.
Okay.
First of all, it's not me. I am not his wife. Look, this guy's obviously a troll, fine, like this is a little much, but I think he's making a good point about where does it end? Where is the line of craziness? There are some things where it's like, okay, we can be reasonable. But for instance, I don't remember why this was brought up the other day. What's stopping people from saying, I identify as disabled? And then it's like, well, now I get to park in the disabled spots.
Right.
Or you had the head of the NAACP who identified as black and still does, I think. Rachel Dolezal.
Yeah, is she? I know she still identifies as black. I'm not sure if she's still the.
No. She's not the head of the NAACP. Hasn't been for some time. But
yes.
To me, I really think that the more that we allow this sort of real insanity around identitarianism and just sort of being fluid, for lack of a better word, with some of these things that are very cut and dry. I mean, Elizabeth Warren, what does she say? She was
Native
American, but she was like one 1/1000th of a percentage
right.
Native American or something like that. So
it's become trendy. And
it's
I feel
become
like
trendy.
Then you've made it silly, like this guy is
Right.
being silly, but you've also done that to kids in school. You've made them feel like it's trendy, and so they're now trying to catch on to it. I mean, I've told this story before, but I know someone who had I think she was 12. It was like 5th grade soccer team, and she was one of 3 that identified as straight. So there was 10 girls ganged up against her, these 3, and making fun of them because they
were straight.
They liked boys, apparently. Or I don't even know if they really liked boys. They just wouldn't say that they were lesbian or trans.
It's genuinely insane. And so I think what he's trying to do is shed light on that insanity. I get it. But the more insane that we allow it to become, it does undermine people who are gay,
Right.
For instance.
Exactly.
And so I think, and actually it was interesting, I spoke to the Log Cabin Republicans a couple weekends ago, and this is a point that they brought up, is like, they feel like they're the kind of gay group for the Republican Party nationally. This was the Washington chapter. They feel like they're being lumped in with like the furries now, like the people who dress up as cats and dogs. You don't dress up as a cat, right, Nicole?
I do not. Oh, Lord, no.
And so they said it's really frustrating for them. Like they've fought for their rights as gay men for such a long time. It was mostly men in the room. I think there was like one woman. And they feel like they're being lumped in with like, the LGBTQI plus. And they're like, for us, it's eroding like everything that we fought for. And they feel like they're being lumped in with absolute ridiculousness. And so
it's like what you said too. You won't call people they or them. We're not changing language.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't make sense. You're one person. We're allowing you to be whoever you want to be, but you're one person. You're not multiple.
Yeah. So first of all, I found that whole interview hilarious, and I don't know how Jesse Waters kept a straight face, but is it a little trolly? Yes. But is he proving an important point? 100% he is. Absolutely. So if we
Ryan
want,
Webb.
Sorry, it's so important that Nicole wants to play it again.
When I go to my shot, that has to be muted. Sorry. Just a little behind the scenes technical.
So if we want a return to sanity, we have to absolutely stop the insanity. All right, that's it for today's episode of Undivided. We got to stop on time so I can get ready for my Will Hurd conversation. Again, we'll post here in the comments where you can watch that conversation if you so choose. But I think it'll be a really good one. The theme of the conversation is Republican reset. Do they need one or do they not? Hint. They do need one. They do. All right. If you haven't joined us as a subscriber already, please do so. It's how we continue to do this show full time, more than full time, way too much. You can sign up, undividedpod.com. Undividedpod.com is your one-stop shop for all things Undivided. You can find out how to watch the show, how to listen to the show. You can email Nicole or I if you've got hot news tips, you just want to say something nice to us. And most importantly, you can find out how to subscribe to support the show on Patreon or Locals. All right, all. We will see you tomorrow back here at noon.